So if you've been practicing the handstand and you've noticed that sometimes you kick too hard and you fall right over, or sometimes you don't kick hard enough and you don't get anywhere, if any of those situations sound familiar, keep watching the video because I'll give you some tips on how I consistently kick up into a handstand and balance it pretty easily. So keep watching the video and let's get into it. So just quickly, before I give you some tips, you should be able to hold a wall handstand for at least 30 seconds. Just having that basic shoulder strength and stability to hold your body upside down is pretty mandatory, because how do you expect to balance it without a wall if you can't even do it with a wall? So if you can do it, hold it for at least 30 seconds, awesome. Let's get into the tips. But if you can't, build up some shoulder strength, practice the walls, and then come back to this video. All right, so tip number one, this one I see all the time. Starting from a standing position and then like doing that gymnastic thing. It's very inconsistent because every time you throw your hands over, your hands can be in different spots. So it's a lot easier and more controlled if you put your hands on the ground already and then do the following steps that I'm about to tell you, instead of throwing your hands in random directions. It's very inconsistent. It might look cool, but trying to be consistent with this. And that falls perfectly into the second step, which is curling your hands or gripping the ground. First thing, get your hands on the ground and then really like try and grab it so your fingers are nice and curled. So like the middle of your finger is not actually touching the ground. And the reason for this is a lot more control than if your hand is flat on the ground, because then you only have like one point of contact. And if you curl it, you have multiple points of contact. So you have a lot more control with your balancing and counterbalancing, and that's tip number two. And then the next tip would be, before you kick up, lean your shoulders over your wrists. That way when you do kick up, your shoulders will be already in the right position, instead of kicking up with your shoulders back here and then having to like throw your whole weight over top instead of already being there and not having to kick as hard. All right, so this next tip I don't see or hear people talk about really at all. The big thing that actually helps me a lot for balancing my handstand and kicking up to it, and it's where you're actually like looking with your eyes. Usually when you balance, you try and focus on one thing. So that's something you obviously want to do when you're balancing in a handstand. Some people look like right between their thumbs. That's a little bit too low for me. So I pretty much just look straight down. So if my hands are like this, I would look right here, because that's where my head is. But really, as long as you're focusing on one thing and not moving like where you're looking as you're trying to balance, that's a good way to like lose balance. That's why when people want to challenge their balancing skills, they like look away, they move their head up and down or close their eyes. So now that I've given you like the whole checklist of what I do right before I do into a handstand, obviously you're just gonna do that like in like 5 seconds. Put your hands on the ground, curl, lean your shoulders over, look, and focus on one thing, and then kick up into it, which is going to be the next tip, which it's kind of hard to explain because it's on paper it sounds pretty simple. It's just don't kick too hard, don't kick too little, because if you kick too hard, fall over, and if you don't kick hard enough, you're not gonna go anywhere. So from here, it's pretty much just like trial and error. If you have all those steps that I said previously in check, and then from there it's just practicing and figuring out how hard you should kick. And a good way to gauge that is to kick too hard and then kick too little, and then figuring out from there. But yeah, it's one of those things where you just gotta practice, and you're gonna fall off, you're gonna fall down quite a lot. But the more time you practice with the handstand, obviously you're gonna get better. So those are gonna be pretty much all the tips and the whole checklist that I personally use to get into a handstand pretty consistently. If you're still struggling with like that wall handstand hold, or you know, getting that strength to hold yourself upside down, you can click the video right here, and it's pretty much how I learned the handstand all by myself in the room, pretty much only using like a chair and a wall. Hopefully it can help you out as well. But without further ado, thank you so much for watching, and peace out.